A warm welcome back to Beyond the Norm podcast. It is a delight to have you back for this special episode around loss, identity, and purpose. Of course, this is partly because of my own story, but also it's what I see with my clients that something triggers us to change, and often it's discomfort, often it's loss. Often it's grief, and it's from that place that we come back to actually our true essence of who we are and what we came here to do and what our purpose is. And it's a really familiar topic that has been in 2025, whether you're listening to this still in 2025 or into 2026. We have had a year where people have lost a lot and they have gone through very uncomfortable change these last few years. And that was COVID aside. So this episode is really on the how to come back to your purpose, how to use tools like breathwork, how to unravel all that sadness and the deep grief to get into the nugget of your purpose and your true identity. So sit back, relax. Some of you might head for a walk. Some of you might take me on a spin in the car. Wherever you are today, enjoy this episode. And please be sure to rate and review and share this episode with anybody else that you know is going through some challenges right now, that are really feeling the heaviness of the world and don't know what's coming next, and might just need a little inside track of that yes, they have lost something significant, and it's not to sugarcoat that, but there's also something exceptional that is coming as well. So please forward them, and for you really enjoy this episode because this is time out for you. And yeah, take care. The thing about loss is, and change right now, is it's no longer a one off. For many of us who are midlife, we are surrounded by loss as a continuum, that the world that we used to live. So we're nostalgic about our past, or perhaps things like restructuring in our job or job losses, whether it's us or our partner or friends or family. That consistency in people's grief becomes more regular the older we get. It's no surprise that even the generations and two generations above us spend their time going to funerals because it's their peers. So loss is only expedited as we get older. And yes, do we become more resilient to it? Of course, but every loss is different. And your losses in this episode are the ones that are most relevant because you're the one who uniquely knows what you're going through right now, even this year or even in the last few years. Or maybe there's something coming ahead. So it's that idea that your confidence goes. So you're not just losing your role, that you're losing your confidence. If you've taken time out to care for somebody, whether it's a baby or a loved one, an elderly relative, we're not only losing this former version of ourselves that we thought was the true essence of ourselves. So we're losing our confidence in the middle of the loss. And it's within that we start questioning, what the WT actual F is this all about? Like, what's it all about? Who am I now? Also, I see again the stage in life that I'm at, friends that are going through divorces and separations. Um, and I think there's that kind of loss of identity. Who am I if I'm not the wife of or the husband of? And that identity is lost as well, or who I thought I was going to become. When we marry someone that thought of like, well, we're going to age together. So, we start seeing that, yeah, that noticing of ourselves, that we're like, who am I now? Or, a big one that is rarely talked about as well. And it is this idea of a grief for what we wished was to happen and it didn't happen. So a future that we'd planned together but is not happening now. And sometimes that can be for those of us, and I put myself in this bracket as well, around fertility or loss, whether it was hoping that you were going to have a baby or more babies. Maybe you've already had some children and you thought you would have more and you thought your future would be different. So we're mourning losses that of the things that never happened to us. And that future and that grounding that we thought we had is all of a sudden gone. And um, it is in that loss that we're not just removing, a version of our life, we're removing a version of ourselves. And that's the part we're not talked about. Nobody talks about identity and loss, very, very rarely. I am no Mel Robbins. I am Norma O'Kelly, and this is my experience on the topic. And I want to make it real and I want to make it accessible for you, because I feel there's no point sugarcoating some of this. It's like, what are the practical things that are going to help me through? So that's what this episode is going to be. So the thing that people feel and rarely talk about, because obviously it's so vulnerable, is this fog that descends on people. And they come to me and they really have an inability to plan for their future, because they're still stuck in the loss and the sadness and the disappointment. And that's a really real place to be. That is a necessary place to be. But where they come to me because they have lingered there too long, or they feel really stuck. And the thing we know about grief and loss is that it's constantly changing. And it's, yes, someday we feel the fog lift a bit and we see some more, and someday the fog comes in thick and heavy. And the reality is, some of the work that is done with me is that initial lifting of the fog, but there's no guarantee that the fog doesn't come back. It is more that you are more equipped for when the days that it comes back, that you do know why you're here and you do know what your purpose is and what your North Star is and what you're aiming towards. So we, it's always about this idea of looking back to begin again. And so often, because if the thing we've lost is really painful, let's say a parent, and there was trauma in the ending, what our human nature to do is to shy away and not want to go there. And the very, I suppose, Catholic and often Irish, UK, American, Australian, we all have it a bit of like, sugarcoating and putting it under the rug and trying to forget about it. And the reality is, that stuff comes up again and again until we do attend to it. So what happens when we're in this fog is we really, really, really can't see anything ahead, but we also can't see ourselves. And we're all about wanting to get back to normal. And this idea of getting back to normal is, there is a new normal emerging after a loss. And we are mostly, we want to push that away because we think, oh, I really don't want that. I just want to get back to normal. I have been really, really inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert these last few weeks in listening to her recent autobiography. It's definitely one I'd love to point out for you to listen to. And it is about her sex and love addiction and also the loss of her wife. And she's the famous author that wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And the book is really that idea of, um, in our losses, who was she becoming? And it was unraveling after she lost her wife, around, that ultimately she had this addiction to love and sex. In fact, when you listen to it, you realize that we all have addictions. And it's like, what are the ones that are crippling us and what are the ones that are enabling us to be? It has been an eye-opening book, and I really would recommend you to look at it. But she talks about her ex-wife, who also had addiction issues, wanting to just have a drink to be normal. I just want to be like everybody else. And I thought of that, and I always laugh when obviously people mention the word normal because of my name, Norma. Even as a child, if somebody roared out the word normal, I turned my head. I had an uncle that used to always call me normal. I have cousins that call me abnormal. I have so many nicknames that really, really close to the word normal. And obviously, I've named my business Beyond the Norm and this podcast. So, what's really interesting is this craving that we all have to belong. And she talks about her ex wife's desire to just to want to have a drink not because she knew she was an addict, but just this craving to want to be normal. And the sad reality for us, just like addicts and in our losses, there is new normals that emerge and we can never go back. And, in the work of the systemic coach, it's this idea of how can we honor this pain? How can we honor this loss? Because, you know, it's not that we're over fixating on the loss as, as the metamorphosis or the crystallises to become the purpose. It's like, how can we take all of this and all this pain and this suffering and now find what is truly meant to be for us? So, there's this, I don't know, it was something that I really came across, I think, um, it kind of, there's two parts of this story that I'm going to talk about today. It's obviously my losses in the past, whether it was the loss of my mother, the loss of my own journey with motherhood that many of you who've listened to the podcast are familiar. So it's not necessarily going over old ground. It's more recent losses, actually. And on the surface might have appeared quite minute, were actually really, really, really big. And that was the loss of how I thought this business would be when I begun it. Again, I was so driven by my purpose that I had a kind of false reality that it would be a little bit Disney like. I think, I've spoken before about like my naivety. So there was this loss of innocence that happened this year when the reality of my undertaking and the reality of, nobody's coming to save me and I have to figure this shit out myself. And that in itself was a type of kind of wake up call and said, yeah, a loss of innocence, a loss of naivety on who was I becoming if I didn't have the money like I had before. So I couldn't buy my gift that I wanted to buy a friend, or even, be the auntie that I would normally be to my nieces and nephew who I would have spoiled, their whole lives. All of a sudden, I'm counting the pennies to go to Tesco and stand at the part of the fridges where you are like waiting for the deals and the offers to come in. That so many parts of this year, I was questioning my choices. I was questioning, you know, who am I if I'm this to the outside world and I have my clients and inside I'm struggling to make ends meet. And this is something I've only skirted over. You're the first to really hear about it on this podcast, that um I had a real identity crisis in this year, because I never had such a money struggle that I worried about my ability to survive. I always knew I had a thriving instinct. I always knew that I had the ability to work hard, which I was still doing. I was never working so hard, but the return just wasn't coming. And my gut had this knowing to keep going, but my heart was just hurting and tired. My head was tired. And I really had a moment of looking into the mirror going, what the fuck have you done? Like, what have you done? What have you chosen here? Like, have you really and utterly abandoned so many other parts of your other dreams and hopes and wishes to get to this point? And it was like I was scolding myself, but it was in that point, and that really deep point, where I had thankfully so much support, both from a business point of view, from a family and friends point of view, who kept rooting for me. And I think it was their support and even an amazing coach that was like, you can keep going, like this is going to pay off, that I didn't give up on myself. But I did have to surrender and say goodbye to certain aspects of my business and certain aspects of the things that I thought, I'd planned for things to work out. Um, and in a former life, in marketing, we used to always say like 80% of the projects that you plan never happen. And there's something very similar in my own business now, that like things that I'd planned that didn't happen, including this podcast, where I'd wanted to do more, but I didn't have the right energy or I didn't have the right enthusiasm. And I was focused on the things that would, directly bring, instant revenue that would really help support. Because when, these podcasts take a lot of time and they don't always bring you the instantaneous business. And a big part was I was in the middle of a program that I wasn't able to acquire more people in. And that was part of the offer, to have more people and build a community. And my biggest loss this year was surrendering to all of it and letting go of the parts that I had planned to be successful and that weren't, and open myself up to what would come next. And I think there was so much grief in that loss that my identity as this, outside successful coach, that I had to become real and really, really focus on my future and ask for help. So there was a total frankness to looking at myself in the mirror and like, who have I become? And what now? What part of my purpose is still real, but also what parts of it are toxic? Because I do think there is a whole toxic purpose angle, that we could abandon ourselves, abandon what's really important for the bigger thing. And really, in everyone, and I'd love to say it now on this podcast, for everybody that said no to me this year, for everybody that their no's were, rarely got to do with me. It was due to personal circumstances or whatever. It wasn't the right time, they didn't have the right money. That I really thanked them. It's like they were my talisman, that my point of kind of no return into certain areas of the business, that I was like, yeah, that's not right for right now. And it made me really reflect and repivot and really check my identity again. And I was making the purpose bigger than me. And that's a really easy one to happen when you're a solo entrepreneur, or whether you're, a coach, or for many of you that are in the wellness industry, we make our purpose and our businesses bigger than ourselves. And there was this idea of being able to right size myself. And who am I now? Who am I now if the world thinks I'm successful, but the truth is I've defined success by money in my bank account? And there was a real shedding. I really have lived the year of the snake, in that shedding of this version of myself that perhaps was in some ways playing too small. I wasn't stepping into the places that I needed to be, which was back in actual business. I had shied away from it after having a challenging ending in my corporate life. I had decided it was easier to work with people who were struggling in corporate, as opposed to actually going straight back into corporate and helping the people that needed it most. And that's where I found myself, really surprisingly. I've become a coach to some educational places. I am back at the heart of business with companies that are really struggling with really, really deep change and their own grief and their own losses. And who are they now with all this change and their identity and their purpose and their mission statements again? I'm back in it, where I love working with those groups that I was so focused on other areas of my business that I never paid attention to, where I was being really called back to. And it's not going back as the old normal, or the old norma even, but more, I'm different now and I have more tools and I'm not part of these systems. I'm external to them, so I can look in and be the coach and be the advisor and be the support that they need for everything they're going through. But what loyalties really loss knocks, is the loyalties. Who am I loyal to now in this loss? So even in that example of myself, where um I was really loyal to what I thought I wanted to be as a coach, um and it was blinding me to what was actually really decent work, that where I was needed. I was so like blinkered vision on like what was important, that I forgot to see um my own, skills and my experience. Or as one person said to me, I actually don't give a shit about your skills, Norma. It's your personality that we need in this business right now. I need somebody to challenge. I need somebody with empathy. I need somebody not to judge. But I also, just need your personality. And it was a big wake up call. Like, stop doing the effing courses. I don't need to train anymore. This idea that I wasn't good enough. And again, that's that, coming from corporate life, where we feel we're never good enough. We find ourselves in these systems that keep us working harder and harder and harder. Um, and it is really, things have to fall apart. Like, we have to, really have, and I think redundancy is one of those ones that forces us to say to ourselves, and it's a question I ask again and again and again, um, is, who are we if we're not working? Who are you if you are not working? And, people wait till retirement to ask those questions, or wait till they get sick, or like this, have a really significant loss in their life, whether it's partner, parent, child, to be like, what is this all about anyway? And my question is to ask those questions before the losses even ever come. Like, what is the thing? What is the thing about you that's most important here? And it's not the work. And even when you're self-employed, even when you're purposeful, even when you have that I'm still much more than the work I do. And this year I had to come back to basics of like, who am I if this business fails tomorrow morning and I get a job in Tesco, which is nothing wrong with that, but you know, it was coming to that stage. Um, will I still be who the essence of I truly am are without doing this role? And I am, because it's just a shell. It's just this 3D, this idea of having to work to survive. Um, Even when you're self-employed and even when you find purpose, it's still just a job. And I think we forget that. We lose sight of this truth, this true identity of ourselves, and this true meaning behind it all, that in fact, and it sounds so cheesy and it's so corny, and I give, a warning label, that it is really ultimately about love. It is really as simple as that. Love for ourselves, love for our friends, love for our family, because at the end of the day, that's all we have. It won't be about work. It will be who's at our bedside. If we're lucky enough that we have people with us as we die, it really, really won't matter. So, what is the work that brings us closer to that highest vibration of love? What is that work? Whether it's teaching, whether it's being a solicitor, whether it's marketing, is, this idea, like I had these beliefs of like, oh, I have to go back, to work in corporate, like for a job, I have to go back, as if this was like a returning when whatever happens me next. And I don't know what's going to happen in 2024, 2026, is the trusting that everything will work out, and the work will come in whatever format. If that's a job, that I still get to be the essence of pure me, and whatever room I show up in, I am me. And the more authentic and the more quirky and the more different I am, that's more the essence of me, as opposed to the skills I have, or what I do, or what I deliver, or what I produce. um your place in the world is always going to shift. So sometimes it's really subtle, you're like, God, I'm changing. And then sometimes it's really, really violent. Like it's a really violent shift. Like it's a big loss or a big ending that causes us to not just lose the thing, like the job or the person, but who am I in relation to the thing? That's the kind of real systemic side of this stuff. Where, yeah, it's a collapsing. It's like it's a falling into that like place in the ground that you can't retrieve it from, because it's gone. Um, so I think even more so, because it's still quite recent history, I would say, um, for me to have gotten to this point of this kind of reshaping my identity again, reshaping my purpose again, after this year. But even when I think about, you know, my deepest loss, which was the loss of my mother, and that'll be 7 years ago next March, or March 2026, depending if you're listening to this. Um, that it forced me to really decide what I wanted and what was important to me, which has led me to start this business and become a coach. But it stripped away everything, because it really, I think it's when your worst nightmare happens, you really start asking the questions of like, what's the point? What's this all about? Um, it kind of rips off any of the masks that you might have had on, because they're gone now. Um, or even the roles that you thought were really important to you, that the purpose is a natural evolution of what comes next. And it's like the purpose is the thing that happens when everything else falls away, because you're left with this true essence of yourself, even if it's vulnerable, even if it's broken, even if you're crying on the floor of a bathroom and there is nowhere to go from here but up, that it's what comes after the crying, after the this is the point of the alchemy. And it's what I've talked about all the year, that because the chaos comes before the calm, and I even was sharing pictures earlier, like we had a storm yesterday, storm Bam, and I have photographs of like just how violent the sea was. I mean, like I went for a walk today and the pathways around here are destroyed, like massive chunks of stones and rocks and cement thrown by the waves up onto the land, like off the seaboard. And you're just like, wow, the power of the storm. Like it's, I love, there's a brilliant Instagram page called The Dark Side of Nature. I love it. Because, we think, oh, nature, it's so pleasant. But like this storm was wickedly violent. And then after that storm settles, there's this calm. And that loss is something similar, but sometimes we can get so caught in the loss that we don't wait for the calm to come, and nothing can come after that because the mourning has paralyzed us. The emotion of the loss has paralyzed us, that that it feels impossible to move forward, and that's where you need help. That's where it's the psychology, the the any form of therapy, the counseling, deep keep coaching work, whatever will support you. That is really, really key after the storm. If you finding that the calm doesn't come or the fog is not lifting and that's going on, and you're feeling so beyond any realm of normality, because even when the coach supports you, the psychotherapist, the counselor, the therapist, there'll be a new normal, but they'll be able to help support you to equip yourself to find your own resources and skills and ways of getting back to liking yourself again in the loss. So that's really important. So one thing, and it's the gem really for me, which has helped support me in all my losses, and in particular this year. And some of you know that I am a master breathwork teacher. So I've done 5 levels with the Blissful Breathwork Academy. And I have found it is the simplest, most accessible, easiest thing to do, even when you're in company, is to find your breath, to come back to the heart. Because remember, the heart and the lungs are side by side. And every time we breathe, we're expanding ourselves, we're softening, we're holding that point of how can I support myself more? How can I soften into and acknowledge what's happening and use these tools to really, really come back? So I'm going to do 2 different breath works, just mini little samples of this. If you're driving, I would prefer if you have pulled over safely. If you're out walking, if you can find a safe seat to do this, or pause it now and play it when you get home, or bookmark this section. But certainly, the safer you are doing this breathwork, whether it's lying down or seated, I will always put that as a contraindication. So most of the breath work that we're doing here now is to regulate that chaos. So when you're deep in that storm and again, the calm hasn't come, it is releasing some of that emotional backlog, that just that needs to come. And it really grounds the body, but it also helps you hear your intuition again. The part that you've like, I don't know what I sound like anymore. I don't know what to trust about myself. I don't even know what I tell myself is true. And because you're right, because so much of it is bullshit, right? So what are the parts that actually are your truth or your higher self? So the breath allows a lot of that, but also restores a sense of safety. So you're regulating your nervous system with your breath. And that's the most important thing. So the 2 breaths that I'm going to do today, and I'm going to start with them now, are really, really quick strategies. One of them is for Actually, the two of them are for that absolute storm and in the middle of that deep loss or that wave of grief that comes with the loss. These are the ones for you. So the first one it's called the physiological sigh, or the fizzy sigh as we know it. And we're just going to start with 3 simple breaths before we even going into it. So I invite you to take a very gentle inhale and letting go on the exhale. Now you can do your exhales through your nose if you prefer. Again, inhaling in through the nose very gently. And exhale, just letting it out or sighing it out through the mouth. And again, one more time, gentle inhaling in. And a gentle exhale out. Well done. This first one in the fizzy sigh, and there's a whole breadth of depth of working, but I'm going to summarize it for you really, really, really quickly. So this is the one that we do naturally when we're crying or when we're very upset. You see it, a child doing it. And just look at me now. So it's a very gentle inhale through the nose. And another micro inhale on top of that. And then it's a sigh it out. Let's do 3 more of those. So inhaling gently in through the nose. And again, another mini inhale in. And then sigh it out. Now, in some of the instructions, they do a longer exhale, but we're going to follow by a breath work in a minute that will do this one. But this is the fizzy sigh. So again, inhaling in through the nose. And a mini inhale again. And then a letting go. Feel your shoulders drop and feel everything settle. Let's do another one in your own time. So inhaling in through the nose. And again, a mini inhale just for a moment. And exhaling and sighing it all out. Feel that release in your chest and just pausing now for a moment. Pausing. Coming back to your natural breath. Already you're feeling some of that stress and that chaos is lifting. So we see it in children when they have that big cry and they do a and they're taking more air in, and then they have a wah, and they have a cry. You see, toddlers are a brilliant sample of this. So it's a great one to do when we're really, 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 at the end of the day and you've had a really, really tough day, is to take those double inhale in and that big sigh out. And hearing your sigh is also going to help you. The next one, which is really complementary to that one, is called vagus breathing, or it's the breath that is going to activate your parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic is the part of our nervous system that brings us back to that safety. And it is the nerve, that parasympathetic or the vagus nerve runs from the top of the head right down to the base of our spine, and it impacts all the organs. So it's a great one to bring us back to, that place of calm and focus. You would have seen it in the American movies where they blow into that brown paper bag and they're like, so it's all about the exhale. So it's less about the inhale and it's all about the exhale. And the quickest way to activate that exhale is through the mouth, but you can also do it by the breath if you have a breathwork practice that is nasally and through the nose. So we're going to inhale very gently in for 2, 3 and 4, and exhale now for 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Again, inhaling in for 2 and 3 and 4, and exhale through the mouth. If you find that you can't get to the 6, that's absolutely fine. Don't force anything. It's one of those breaths that is nothing is to be forced. So again, inhaling in through the nose and a long exhale through the mouth. Gently inhaling for 2, 3 and 4. And exhaling for 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Just noticing and stopping now and coming back to your own breath. So between the physiological sigh or the fizzy sigh and that vagus breathing, I want you to sit back and just notice what has changed. What feels different now? That calm or those losses that you've had and you've been experiencing, whether recent or even a loss from many years ago that is awake or alive in you now, just notice how the breath can bring you to that place of calm. It's not forgetting or sugarcoating or, thinking that that never happened. It is literally adding into the parts of you and acknowledging that this is there and this is having deep impact on me, but I'm in control. I'm in control of my emotions, that I can calm the storm somewhat. So another lovely one is, you're gently inhaling in, asking, who am I becoming? And the exhale is, who am I ready to release? So who am I becoming? Inhaling in. And on the exhale, who am I ready to release? So what versions of me in my identity that are no longer needed? One that, this part of us that's addicted to stress, the part of us that's addicted to productivity or, material possessions, that know that those parts of us that are, yes, we need things to survive, but how much stuff do you actually need? These are identity shifts that I see again and again because we start realizing what's actually important here, and it's not stuff, and it's not accolades at work, let me tell you. So I suppose the thing that I really want you to know as well, that can feel, I think when you're in loss and you're seeking purpose and your identity is changing, the one thing that is really, really, really pertinent to all of this is the feeling that I'm alone. You know what I talked about earlier around this idea of I just want to be normal, I just want to be like everybody else. That's craving that belonging. But can I tell you, there is a collective loss right now. So there's a collective awakening. Like there is a stirring in the world that this world is rearranging itself, whether we like it or not. Like there's a new world order that's coming in. So it's the dying of the masculine, the fading away of patriarchy, the the grounds of what worked before are no longer going to work. Something's got to change. There's a rise in the power of femininity, and I'm not talking about that just in men. Or not just women, rather, that the true balance of masculine and healthy feminine energy in both male and female. It's not um you know just for the rise in femininity. It's not about that. It's around um the feminine creative energy that's rising in men as well. So we're heading towards this more intuitive world. Like you're seeing the rise of spirituality, of the return of religion. I was watching a video the other night of like all these TikTokers that go are like rating the best masses in churches in New York. Like, I mean, people are seeking something more than what's out there now. So there's a collective awakening. So it's not just you that's going through this experience. Many people are really questioning who they are this year. And these last few years and 2026 will be similar. Um, so you're not, you might feel really alone, and it might be location specific. You could be um, living somewhere that feels really, 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 yeah, different. And you might be feeling that, oh my God, I'm the only person in my village or in my community that feels this way. And my friends aren't, they're not, their identities feel like really, really fixed, and I'm the only one changing. But this is happening at a global scale, and it is about finding your people. Um, and know that, you know, work, relationships, purpose, everything's in flux. So, in systemic work, we talk about finding place. So I'd really encourage you to find place. And if that is a yoga class, and if it's 10 miles away, if that's a cacao ceremony once a month, or a retreat, or going on a different holiday, like meeting people on the Camino, what a great place to find, collective change, like finding your people. And Maybe the spaces you're in are no longer serving you. And that in itself is really scary because you're saying goodbye to the loyalty of friends of before. But it's not about cutting cords with them necessarily, but it's more about finding a place that you can truly be this new self. And if that's about sharing your vulnerabilities or your dreams or your hopes and it is celebrated, that's where you need to show up. That's what the world is asking for us now. And hope is really, really a part of this. I know some spiritual teachers that would say hope is for beggars because it doesn't have action, but the hope that I know has lots of action. So really finding your place that will bring that kind of spark, where you walk out of the room and you feel energized and excited. They're the rooms you got to be finding yourself in now with this, uncertainty and this awakening. And it's so cheesy to say find your tribe, but it is so key. So I wanted to list out, and I'm going to be looking at some of my notes here on this, how to rebuild your identity and your purpose after loss. So many people talk about the loss, so many people talk about the purpose, but very few people are saying about how to rebuild it, how to find this new version of yourself that's emerging along with your purpose. So the first one is naming what's ended. Like if it's not obvious, all the things that are dying in you. It's a question that I'm asking. I'm running a wintering project at the moment, and in particular, I find myself, this is being recorded just before solstice. So that idea of what has ended, identity hates ambiguity. So the more clear you are on what has ended and naming it and acknowledging it, write it down. Be really, really clear. That's the first one. The second one is honor the ending. So this is the work that I do in my coaching, is that idea of attend to your endings. There's probably things that were left unsaid, and I'm not talking about going back into an old building where you lost your job and giving them peace of your mind. It's not that. This is an energetic ritual where, again, you write down maybe the things that you wish you would have said and you didn't get to say, or equally the things you wish they said. One of them is the importance of them saying your contribution here was really valued and we didn't always see what you did do. So I think that's really, really key and important to, attend to that ending. Get to say what was unsaid and get to hear back what you wished was said as well. Like, I think when you've had a sudden death or a loss like that as well, these are really, really important things to support you in the ending. There's one that's really important here, and it's kind of what I talked about earlier around, you have to let yourself be lost for a little bit. And your timeline to how long you want to do that for is your timeline without judgment. This is, in the Celtic calendar, this period between Samhain and solstice and even into early January is the darkest period because everything needs to go dark. We need to get totally lost in the darkness for the seed to grow, for it to be reborn. And in our loss is the same. There was a mourning period in Celtic times, and even in Catholic times in our parents' generation, of people wore black, and the first Christmas you didn't put up decorations. This is that period of mourning of what you've lost. Mourn it. Really be lost. Feel that, because if you bypass that shit can come back to haunt you as well. So really spend the time there. Regulate your body. Find ways of helping your nervous system. I gave you 2 very mini breathworks, but find a class, find a support. It's so much easier when we breathe together than on our own. It has so much more symbolism. Find retreats. There's lots of us breathwork teachers around there now. Some are better than others. Some are more qualified. Some have the gift. So find the right people. Notice to where you're being drawn to. It was about what I was saying earlier around this idea of finding those tribes. What is tugging your heart? Where are you finding the curiosity? What is annoying you? That's also information. When you come away from, people that you used to hang out with, or a situation where you never questioned it, and all of a sudden you're like, shit, I feel so de-energized. In fact, I feel vampired. Um, I'm not enjoying this at all. And can I say this can be in a work context as well, where God, I thought I used to love this team, and actually they're all just pissing me off now. Because you're changing, you're evolving, and something different may need to come. And this is where support of, a transition coach like myself, a career coach, can really, really help look at that. Um, New boundaries. And as one of my coaches says, you don't always have to verbalize the boundaries. They're your internal boundaries, of like what's going to be for you. Um, and the next one is, and it's really lovely, and it's like your new desires. I think when we're nearly like our libido for life nearly disappears when, you know, we have a loss. It's like our desires become muted and we don't know where they are. So when we find ourselves in the spaces that rise some curiosity or some energy again, we have desires that come up again. And I notice that all the time. I rarely give myself enough time to get lonely, to, I'm so busy all the time, or when I'm not busy, I'm resting because I'm tired from the busy, that I rarely give myself a chance to be lonely, because if I gave myself a chance to be lonely, it would be really obvious that my desires to meet someone or, have those experiences would really come alive in me. So there's something about really allowing the boredom to come, allowing, the morning of what I thought things were going to be, for those desires to come up again. Because if you're not allowing yourself to stop, you're probably not in touch with your true desires. And I'm not talking about amorous, heart-led desires. I'm talking about all desires, like the desire for nourishing food, the desire for, time away, or a time with a friend that you've already seen. It's like it's deeper. It's a deeper desire to have more purpose in your life and your work. So these are all just breadcrumbs into this new identity that's evolving after your loss. Um, Let your purpose reveal itself. The more you push on purpose, the more it won't come. Um, it's kind of a thing that emerges gradually. Certainly for me in my career, where I did an NLP course probably 10 years before I walked into my life coach training. Like, it takes time. And it's only the more spaces that you go and seek out that are you curious about, that you kind of be like, oh, now I feel a true belonging. Now I feel fully seen. And even then, you'll go out of those rooms and there'll be more rooms again. So your purpose is evolving. And even, as I said, this year for me, where my purpose got too big and it got nearly toxic, um, that I was always skirting around burnout, that you just have to be really careful with it and watch what happens. Like, the information and what we call the field information will be there. Um, it's like what feels alive and what feels true. And if you keep on those paths, then the purpose will come. But certainly it's not like diamonds are made with pressure. Purpose isn't like that. It's a much more slow burn. Um, and I've worked and I've mentored so many people over the year, and they think they've found the thing, and then they go and find another thing, and they're like, oh no, two is better than one. Um, but they could have just stopped at one place. So when we continually put ourselves in new rooms and new situations and new experiences, as opposed to the same pattern in the same places, it's hard to see. And that's why books and podcasts and, even if you feel fenced in or still in the fog, are a great way, I find, of taking me into a whole other world without actually having to get on a plane. Certainly that it helps kind of my mind expand and my heart as well. So, there's no excuse right now. It's so much at your fingers that is free. And I'm not talking about spending endless time online, because equally I can be still inspired by a forest, a sea, staring at a kitten. It's not as always from the learned or rooms, it's nature as well, allows that softness to come. So the final piece of this is this thing about, like, fast forwarding time, after a loss, that we think that we can expedite our grief journey, that it's really about rebuilding gently, going slowly with things, um, and with intention, that, um, the evolution of the purpose and the identity is something that evolves, and it takes time, and it should not be rushed. So really, it's my favorite sentence is to say go gently as I sign off on anything, but this is really true about this topic as well. It is the need for patience and allowing the signs to come even when they feel wrong. It's like, as I said, this year, my biggest gratitude is to all those people who said no, because every one of those no's was a redirection. And if I had took it like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong work, or I'm not doing the right thing, I wasn't really sitting and accepting the no for what it was, which was a gentle redirection. So allowing your, identity to also evolve, where, oh, I thought that was the space. Oh, maybe that's not the space. And just going on that journey with it. There is no destination with it. We're constantly evolving. So as I close and I just do a quick recap of everything that we spoke about, is the idea that, when we've gone through a loss or of any kind, and there's grief that comes with it, an evolution, we're changed as a result, and our identity, our true identity, becomes revealed. It's like we're cracked open, and in that cracking open, we often find our purpose, and we turn so much of that pain that we've been through into purpose. But we need to be careful with that and to tread cautiously that it is all there for us. And, if I've learned anything from this year, it is that surrendering and trusting what's coming, that yes, we can make steps to better every day and conscious effort to move forward. But so much of it is trusting what's coming up, trusting the information, trusting who appears, trusting the rooms that we walk into and what is there for us. So really, life isn't here to break us. It is here to crack us open and show our true essence of ourselves. And it is what is left behind is what that true essence of ourself is. And this is where we can breathe again and use that breath as your way of really tapping into your heart space, your gut space, and this higher self that has all the wisdom that you need and that you can find it from within you. And I really hope this is something that you come back to again and again. Maybe you might listen to it now, and you might listen to it again in the new year or at any point next year, to remind you that what you're going through right now, I'm sorry that that's happening to you. And I know it'll also be a huge, inspiration for what comes next. And if I can be of any support at all, just please drop me a DM on Instagram. You'll find me on LinkedIn. And just to say, please keep breathing and go gently. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. I am so grateful for all of you and all of the listeners to this podcast. I had a record wrapped year, something like listenership up by 900% in 2025. Like, oh my God. For somebody who I wish I had given the podcast more love than that it really deserves, but I didn't always have the right heart set for it this year, as I have now shared. Now you know a little bit more. But I hope, as I've always said, I if it became a chore, I wouldn't do it. So when I find myself here, I do it with joy and with love, and I think that comes across in the episodes. So if this is your first episode, please be sure to look at my back catalogue of episodes. There are plenty, and they've been there since 2021. There's ones on my own true purpose and how I find purpose. and how I talk about purpose now versus how I did a few years ago. That might be really interesting for you to listen back to as well, because I really, at that point, really thought it was the be all and end all, and I've really right sized it this year. So do listen back to that. That will be really interesting for you. But I would say listen to your heart more and more. And if this podcast really resonates, I'd love for you to rate it, whether you're on Apple or you're on Spotify or another platform or on YouTube. Give it a like, share it with somebody else that you know is going through a really tough time. And please follow along, and please drop me a note on what you think of the episode. I rarely hear, it's often when I meet you in person that you tell me, but I don't always meet all my listeners because some of you are from around the world. So please do tell me and drop me a note or a comment on the episode. I'd love to hear what you think and what else you'd like to hear from me. I have been asked to record more meditations and breath work, and I'm preparing some of those. I have a fabulous interview to share that's coming up next after this one that was recorded a long time ago, and she's been very patient, and I look forward to sharing that episode out with you very soon. But in the meantime, please go gently. Take care. Chat to you soon.